Rain hammered the streets in a steady, merciless rhythm, pooling into dark puddles that reflected the dim yellow glow of flickering street lamps. The city was quiet at this hour. Most people had long retreated into the warmth of their homes. Officer Daniel Miles was nearing the end of his shift, his patrol car rolling lazily down the slick road. He was looking forward to a hot cup of coffee and the dry comfort of his apartment. Then he saw it. A small figure stood alone near the edge of the road, motionless under the downpour. At first, Daniel thought it was a lost pet, but as his headlights caught the outline, his heart skipped. A child. Daniel eased the car to a stop, wipers squeaking against the windshield. He opened the door, the cold rain immediately soaking into his uniform. The boy couldn't have been older than 7. His hair clung to his pale face, and he wore only a thin hoodie and jeans, far too light for cold, in his right hand. He clutched the teddy bear so worn it looked as though it had been loved through 100 sleepless nights. "Hey, buddy," Daniel called softly, crouching a few feet away. "Are you lost?" The boy looked up slowly. His eyes weren't filled with tears like Daniel expected. They were steady and tense, as if this child had already seen too much. "I know where my mom is," the boy said. Daniel's brows furrowed. This wasn't the usual, "I want to go home," plea he often heard from missing children. This was something different, strange. "Okay," Daniel said, lowering his voice. "What's your name?" The boy hesitated, glancing down at the teddy bear. "Eli." "All right, Eli," Daniel said. "Where's your mom?" Eli raised a small hand and pointed toward a narrow alley that split between 2 crumbling apartment blocks. Daniel glanced toward the dark gap between the buildings. The alley looked like the kind of place you'd avoid even in daylight. "You've been out here long?" Daniel asked. Eli shook his head. "I was waiting for you." The word sent a chill through Daniel that had nothing to do with the weather. "Waiting for me?" "You're a police officer," Eli said simply. "You can help." Daniel considered calling for backup right away, but there was something in the boy's expression, something urgent but unafraid, that made him decide to follow first, ask questions later. "All right," Daniel said, standing. "Lead the way." The alley swallowed them almost instantly, the rain muted by the looming walls on either side. The ground here was uneven, scattered with broken bottles and scraps of cardboard. Eli's sneakers splashed through shallow puddles, but his pace never slowed. "You sure your mom is this way?" Daniel asked, keeping his voice low. "Yes," Eli replied. "She's close." Daniel kept scanning the shadows, his hand hovering near the holster at his side. The deeper they went, the quieter it got. No traffic, no voices, just a faint drip of rainwater from rusted gutters above. They turned a corner, and the glow of the street lamps behind them disappeared entirely. Now only the faint beam of Daniel's flashlight cut through the darkness. The alley opened into a wider, empty lot surrounded by old chain-link fencing. In the middle stood a building Daniel recognized from old patrol reports, an abandoned warehouse, condemned years ago after a fire damaged the structure. Eli stopped at a small side door. "She's inside," he said. Daniel studied the boy carefully. His voice was calm, too calm for a kid in this situation. "Eli, has your mom been here long?" The boy nodded slowly. "They keep her here." "They?" Daniel pressed. "Who's they?" Eli just hugged his teddy bear tighter and looked at the door. "We should go in before they come back." Daniel's training told him this could be dangerous, very dangerous. He unclipped his radio but didn't call for backup yet. Something told him they didn't have much time. He knelt down to Eli's level. "I want you to stay behind me," Daniel said firmly, "no matter what happens." Eli nodded once. The side door creaked loudly as Daniel pushed it open, the sound echoing through the hollow space beyond. The air inside was colder, heavy with the smell of damp wood and something metallic, like old rust or dry blood. Daniel's flashlight swept across the warehouse interior. Broken furniture, piles of debris, shattered glass crunching under their feet. Every sound seemed louder in the vast emptiness. Then Daniel noticed something, a line of small footprints in the dust, too small to belong to an adult. Eli was already moving toward them. "This way," he said quietly. They followed the prints down a narrow corridor until Daniel heard it. Soft, almost like singing. A woman's voice, humming a lullaby, the kind of song meant to comfort a child to sleep. Eli froze. "That's her," he whispered. They reached a corner room, where a single flickering bulb hung from the ceiling. In the far corner, a woman sat with her back to them, gently swaying. Her hair was tangled and long, falling in thick waves over her shoulders. She was rocking as though holding something, but her arms were empty. Daniel took a careful step forward. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The woman turned slowly. Her face was pale and drawn, dark shadows under her eyes. But when her gaze fell on Eli, something lit up inside her. "You found me," she breathed, her voice trembling. Eli dropped his teddy bear and ran to her, wrapping his arms around her thin frame. She clutched him as though afraid he might vanish. Daniel moved closer, noticing something disturbing. Her wrists were loosely bound with frayed rope, as if someone had tied her but abandoned the restraint. "Who did this to you?" Daniel asked. Before she could answer, a sound shattered the fragile reunion. A loud crash from somewhere deeper in the building. Heavy footsteps echoed through the warehouse. Eli's head whipped toward the sound, and for the first time, Daniel saw fear in his eyes. "They're here," he whispered. Daniel drew his gun, stepping in front of them. The footsteps grew louder, then stopped just outside the room. A deep voice spoke from the shadows. "You shouldn't have brought him here, officer." Daniel's grip on his pistol tightened. His flashlight beam caught movement in the doorway. A tall figure stepped into view. A black mask covered the lower half of his face, his eyes sharp and unblinking. His shoulders were broad, his presence filling the room like a shadow made solid. "Who are you?" Daniel demanded. The man tilted his head slightly. "The one who keeps him safe," he said, his voice disturbingly calm. The metallic glint of a knife caught the light as he shifted his stance. "You call tying up a woman and keeping her in a rotting warehouse safe?" Daniel shot back, moving slightly to block Eli and the woman from the man's line of sight. The masked man gave a slow, almost mocking chuckle. "You don't understand. She belongs here, and so does the boy." Eli's mother's voice trembled. "Don't listen to him. He's dangerous. He's the reason I've been here." The masked man took a slow step forward, the knife hanging loosely in his right hand. "They always run," he muttered, "but I bring them back." Daniel's instinct screamed at him. This wasn't someone you reasoned with. This was someone you stopped. "Eli, stay behind your mom," Daniel ordered firmly without looking back. "Ma'am, when I say go, you run for that door." The masked man's gaze flicked briefly to Eli, then back to Daniel. His voice dropped into a chilling tone. "The boy knows too much." That was enough. Daniel took a step forward, raising his weapon. "Drop the knife. Now!" For a moment, silence hung heavy in the room, broken only by the faint hum of the swinging light bulb. Then, in one sudden motion, the man lunged. Daniel fired, a deafening crack that echoed through the warehouse. The man stumbled, but instead of going down, he slammed his shoulder into Daniel, knocking the gun from his grip. The weapon skittered across the dusty floor. Daniel barely managed to block a slash of the knife, the blade grazing his sleeve. The man was strong, much stronger than Daniel anticipated, but Daniel used his training, stepping inside the man's reach, shoving him back hard toward a stack of crates. "Go! Now!" Daniel shouted. Eli grabbed his mother's hand, pulling her toward the side exit. The sound of their footsteps pounded in Daniel's ears as he fought to keep the masked man distracted. The man swung again, the knife missing Daniel's ribs by inches. Daniel threw a punch, catching the man in the jaw. The masked man stumbled, but his knife hand shot out, catching Daniel's arm with a shallow cut. Pain flared hot, but Daniel didn't stop. He charged forward, tackling the man to the ground. The struggle was brutal. Knees, elbows, fists, the knife flashing dangerously close. Daniel managed to slam the man's wrist against the concrete until the knife clattered away. He grabbed the weapon and tossed it across the room, while out of reach, but the man was relentless. He threw Daniel off, scrambling toward the door. By the time Daniel was back on his feet, the man had disappeared into the dark maze of the warehouse. Breathing hard, Daniel grabbed his radio. Dispatch! This is Unit 47, officer in need of immediate backup at the old West End warehouse. Possible armed suspect on foot. Victim secured. Outside, rain still poured in sheets. Eli and his mother stood near the squad car, drenched but safe. Eli's tiny frame was shaking, not from cold, but from the adrenaline of everything that had just happened. Daniel holstered his weapon and walked over. "You're both safe now," he said, his voice steady though his pulse was still pounding. Eli looked up at him, his eyes wide. "I told you I knew where she was." Daniel managed a small smile. "You did, kid. You were braver than most adults I know." Backup arrived minutes later, the flashing red and blue lights painting the wet streets. Paramedics checked over Eli and his mother, wrapping them in blankets. At the station, after hours of statements and reports, the full truth began to emerge. Eli's mother, Sarah, had been missing for over 3 years. The man who took her was a former neighbor, someone obsessed, convinced she was meant to be with him. He had kept her hidden in the warehouse, moving her whenever he thought the police were getting close. Eli had been kept elsewhere, another location, a smaller apartment, until recently. That night, he overheard the man on the phone talking about visiting Sarah. Eli waited until the man was asleep, then slipped out into the storm. He didn't know exactly how to find the police, but he knew he had to try. That's when he saw Daniel's patrol car. When Daniel asked him why he hadn't been scared to wander into the night alone, Eli's answer was simple. If I didn't go, she'd never come back. The suspect was never found that night. He vanished into the rain like a shadow, but the investigation didn't stop. Daniel promised Sarah and Eli that the department would find him. As dawn broke, Daniel stood outside the small room where mother and son sat together. Eli leaned against his mom, fast asleep, his hand still holding hers. Sarah looked up at Daniel through the glass, her lips forming silent words. "Thank you." For Daniel, the most shocking part wasn't the rescue itself. It was realizing that a 7-year-old had carried a secret for years, waiting for the right moment to act. And when that moment came, he walked through the rain and into the darkness, risking everything for love. And Daniel knew he'd never forget the first word the boy ever said to him. "I know where my mom is."